Hey there, I'm Shane, and in this video I'm going to be talking all about the Atomos Ninja 5. It's a little powerhouse of an external monitor and recorder capable of capturing up to 4K in 60 frames per second in ProRes RAW with compatible cameras. I've been using it as my primary field recorder for a few years now, and in this video I'm going to talk about all my favorite things about it and the things I dislike, and why I still recommend it as something you should consider buying in 2021. For a bit of context to this video, I've been using the Atomos Ninja 5 paired with the various Sony cameras that I've had over the years. And I initially started off just using this as a monitor and a means to preview my footage with a corrective LUT applied. However, since I got the Sony a7S III, I've been using it more and more often as an external recorder. And I vastly prefer the workflow of editing off the hard drive you use with this monitor rather than having to constantly import my footage onto the computer. And I find it's just a much more convenient workflow that has a lot less steps involved. With that in mind, I'm not a colorist, I'm not using a cine camera, and I'm coming at this with the perspective of an independent professional, mainly operating the camera by myself with no assistance. So it's just about ease of use as a single operator, not necessarily in a full production environment. Before I dive too deep into the review, I just want to cover the basics of what the Ninja 5 actually is. And at its roots, it's a monitor. And with that, it has a whole bunch of features that make capturing footage with your camera more convenient, such as focus peaking, false colors, zebras, the ability to use LUTs, and a whole plethora of other monitoring features that make capturing footage simpler. That's not all it does though. It also is an external recorder, allowing you to often record in bit rates and quality higher than you can record internally on your camera, which is again a huge compelling feature and unlocks the full potential of your camera. The Ninja 5 isn't relegated to just recording camera footage though. Realistically, it can capture anything that has an HDMI in or out, allowing you to record TV, movies, game footage, realistically anything you want. Though it's designed to be a camera monitor, and I'm going to be reviewing it in that context. The display of the monitor is 5.2 inches and has a resolution of 1920 by 1080, which is full HD, and is a touchscreen. It has the ability to display 10-bit color at 1000 nits of brightness, which means it can be operated in full daylight with quite some ease, though the screen does have quite a bit of glare just because it is glossy. The chassis of the monitor is made of aluminum and hardened plastic, which feels quite durable. However, it is notable to say that all the I/O and vents are fully exposed, and there's absolutely no weather sealing on this unit. So if you plan on going out in the rain, make sure you bring an umbrella. The heaviest part of this monitor is usually going to be the battery, and it uses Sony NPF batteries, which are both very common and affordable, which is quite nice. And the monitor ships with a dummy plate that accepts DC input, so you can easily adapt it to use AC wall power, or if you don't want to have a battery on the back of the monitor, you can adapt it to use D-tap, so you can plug it into a V-mount battery or an external power source. Along the exterior of their monitor, there's multiple 1/4-20 screw holes with locking pins that make mounting it quite convenient. However, I highly recommend picking up the official accessories made by SmallRig that add NATO rails to the exterior, which make mounting it a whole lot more convenient, as well as providing a cheaper alternative to a sun hood that I find is actually more convenient because it can fold up. The monitor actually has active cooling as well, so there's a fan inside it with vents behind the battery door and SSD and an exhaust vent along the top. It is very noticeable when you boot it up. However, in everyday operation, it's not noticeable on your microphones, and the only situations where it will be obtrusive, I find, is in a quiet room when you probably already are using a shotgun mic or a lavalier to capture your audio, so it's not going to be an issue in those situations either. In all my time using it, I never had an issue with it overheating, and I find it's actually quite nice in the winter because it keeps your hands warm while you're holding the camera. With regards to the inputs and outputs, because of the compact form factor of this monitor, it's just the basics. On the left side of the display, there's two HDMI ports that are HDMI 2.0, allowing for 4K footage up to 60 frames per second and 1080p footage up to 240 frames per second. If this isn't enough though, there is the option to have an SDI adapter in where the battery slot is, allowing for 6K footage and an easier workflow if you prefer using SDI cables. On the right side of the display, there's two 3.5mm headphone jacks allowing for microphone in and headphone out in both stereo, as well as a 2.5mm LANC cable adapter that allows you to have an external record button to trigger the monitor. Also on the right hand side of the display is the power button in the top right corner, which if you tap once, disables the touchscreen, and if you hold it down for 4 seconds, turns the monitor on or off. And I really just wish this was a toggle or a switch that would make it a lot easier to turn it on or off, because I find having to hold the power button down every time is tedious, and I often accidentally forget to actually turn off the monitor when I put it down, and then the next time I pick it up, the battery's dead and the touchscreen is disabled because I didn't hold it down long enough. Conversely to this, the record button is only digital and located in the bottom left-hand corner of the display, which I can find a little bit difficult to operate because there's no tactile feedback, so it's difficult to operate in the cold. And when the sun hood is on, it's also a little bit inconvenient to have to reach over top of it to touch it. And I just wish there was a physical button to hit record. And I also know that you could use a remote via the LANC input, but I have yet to find a good remote that's either affordable or convenient for me to attach to my cage. So these are just two very minor points of frustration, but they are fundamental to the operation of the monitor, and I do get frustrated with them from time to time. Moving on to a more positive note, the software on this monitor is absolutely awesome and extremely reliable. It's very fluid and feels like I'm operating a phone, and Atomos has put out multiple updates for it showing their continued support, though I've never even had a hiccup or glitch with it. One small complaint is there's very limited customization on this monitor. Because there's no customizable buttons on the outside or even digital buttons on the display you can choose, you're just relegated to their default layout, which isn't bad, and the menus are laid out very well. It's just there is no customization and you have to live with what they give you. When it comes to actually monitoring your footage, the Ninja has all the features that you would want. With regards to focus peaking, it has a robust set of features such as multiple colors to choose from, 3 different levels of contrast, and the ability to flip it to black and white to improve seeing what's actually in focus. There are multiple histograms to choose from in vector scopes, as well as the option to put your footage to 1:1 or a 2x crop to further see what's in focus. There is the option to have zebras at whatever level you would like, as well as false colors to make sure that your exposure is correct. There are multiple overlays you can put on your footage to visualize certain crop factors, and there's even the option to de-squeeze your footage if you're shooting in anamorphic for a live preview. One of the most useful features on this monitor for myself is the ability to import lookup tables, aka LUTs, which allow you to have a certain creative look applied to your image on the monitor, but still record in whatever format you'd like. And I use this all the time to have a LUT to convert my log footage into a 7:9 color space so I can more easily figure out my exposure as well as my white balance in camera without having to give up the dynamic range that the log footage provides. It also makes it much more convenient to show my footage to a client because they can easily see what the footage is going to look like with a slight edit applied. Even though I still retain all the creative ability to edit it in post, I can preview it with at least a slightly baked look so that it looks better on set. The main appeal of this monitor for most people is going to be its ability to record footage externally, and it does so via the SSD slot in the back of the monitor. You can choose to buy the proprietary drives that are a little bit smaller and fit nice and flush with the monitor's body. However, I just opted to buy a couple of computer SSD SATA drives that work perfectly fine, and you just throw them in the caddies that you can buy from Atomos. And an often overlooked thing is that buying SSDs is way cheaper than buying the internal SD cards or CF Express Type A cards that are needed to record the higher quality footage that most cameras operate on now. So it's actually way cheaper and way more convenient to have a workflow involving these SSDs that you can just slot directly into your computer and edit directly off of, whereas having to use the SD cards is both less convenient and much more expensive. So It's a very good workflow simply to just record to the monitor because it's easier to do so. With that said, the recording options on this monitor are actually quite nice with various flavors of Avid DNx HD or Apple ProRes in a variety of different compressions. I'm not going to go head to head in comparing each of these compression types because A, I don't think I'm the best person to do so, and I also just don't think I have time to cover it in this video. However, I will say my favorite compression is the Apple ProRes 422, which I find is the right balance between quality and file size, and is quite easy to edit as well because it's not terribly compressed and you can kind of churn through the footage quite quickly even on a low power machine. The flashy headline of this monitor though, and its real selling point, is its ability to record raw footage externally in 4K up to 60 frames per second, and it does so via the Apple ProRes RAW format, which unfortunately isn't the best RAW codec out there. And I say this because yes, it's an entirely competent RAW file, however, it's only really useful if you're using Final Cut Pro. And if you're using other software like Premiere Pro or DaVinci Resolve, it's incredibly hamstringed and you lose the creature features that RAW provides, such as white balance adjusting, ISO, and just a lot of the things that you'd want from your RAW footage. And in that software, like Premiere or DaVinci, it's treated more like 12-bit 422 footage, but you lose out on the convenience of having the noise reduction done in your camera, having stabilization modes that certain cameras have, and just a lot of the convenience factors that other formats have, with none of the additional factors that make RAW more compelling. So it's certainly much higher quality footage. However, it's just very limited at this time, and hopefully in the future, Apple ProRes is more functional in other software, but as of now, it's just a very inconvenient format to work in. So I exclusively pretty much use every other format but it, unless I really just need that high quality and need that increased dynamic range with better colors. However, as of now, it's not entirely functional and I just don't find myself using it very often. The last topic I want to talk about is audio recording, and this monitor records in 24-bit up to 48 kHz in 8 channels. But the small but significant feature is that this monitor has an additional audio stereo input on it. So if you're shooting like myself on a mirrorless camera, you really lack audio inputs, and this adds a whole nother stereo input, meaning you can get 2 mono inputs on it and have more recording options, which makes it a lot more convenient in a fast turnaround workflow where you don't want to have to sync up audio in post. So I find this is very convenient and has been a lifesaver a lot of the times when I don't want to have an external audio recorder when I don't need to. So when it's all said and done, the monitor comes in at 600 US dollars or 800 Canadian, and bear in mind that when you purchase it, you also will need to pick up an HDMI cable, a battery, and storage options because none of that's included with the monitor. However, I still think it's a fantastic value, and if you are especially considering to buy external storage with it, it's way cheaper than having to buy SSDs or CF Express cards for your camera itself, so you do end up saving some money in a roundabout sort of way. The only reason I wouldn't recommend buying this monitor is if you never plan to record externally, to consider the Atomos Shinobi, because it's basically the same monitor without the SSD mount on the back. Or if you want to have a larger display, the Atomos Shogun has a 7-inch monitor and has SDI inputs built into it, so that's a lot more convenient for high-end workflows. So overall, my opinion of this monitor is very high. I've really enjoyed using it over the years and have become increasingly reliant on it just because of how convenient it is to use. My only real point of frustration with it is the fact that there is no customizable buttons on the outside of it, and that it's very reliant on the touch screen. And really that's just the price you pay by having such a compact body. However, it still is inconvenient and I wish there's just 1 or 2 buttons on it. However, it does more than compensate for this with having incredibly powerful software that is very easy to use, as well as having all the recording options, which are just stupendous, and I've really enjoyed integrating them into my workflow. That's going to be it for the video though. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave a comment below. I'd be happy to help in whatever way that I can. And if you enjoyed the video, maybe consider liking it and sharing it. It goes a really long way in helping me grow the channel. And maybe if you could consider subscribing, because I love making videos like this and I'd love to make more. Anyways, thanks for watching and I hope you have a fantastic day. I'll see you in the next video.